planning commissioners on that we were expecting. So barring being able to get video of Commissioner Scissors, Chairman Reese, I think we're ready to begin.
Okay, perfect. I don't have my gavel, but you can imagine that I have banged my gavel.
Just bump your forehead.
Yeah, there you go. Welcome to the April 14th, 2019 City of Grand Junction Planning Commission virtual meeting, the first one ever. We encourage all of the members of the public to please participate online where you can provide comments and watch the live streaming of this meeting at gjspeaks.org. So I am saying Commissioner Ehlers, Commissioner Gatzos, Commissioner Scissors, Commissioner Cesaris, Commissioner Teskey, Commissioner Wade, and myself. Are there any other commissioners who are on here whose name I did not call? Okay, great. So the first item on our agenda is to approve the February 25th, 2020 meeting minutes and the April 9th, 2020 meeting minutes. Have all of the planning commissioners had a chance to review those minutes?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. If so, then I will entertain a motion to approve those minutes as presented.
I would so move, Madam Chair.
Second.
Thank you. Commissioner Wade had the motion and Commissioner Cesaris had the second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries 7-0. The next portion of our virtual meeting, we'll move into the public hearing portion. Public hearings are conducted pursuant to the laws of the state of Colorado, the city of Grand Junction, and the regulations duly adopted by the Planning Commission of the city. The purpose of this hearing is to receive information and testimony by all interested parties to enable this Planning Commission to make appropriate findings and reach the conclusions required to be made by law. Both a written and video recording will be made of these proceedings. And if folks could please mute their phones if they're not talking, we're hearing some background noise. Thank you. Both a written and video recording will be made of these proceedings. Those who desire to be heard that have not already sent in written comments or left a voicemail for us to review this evening should provide written comments at www.gjspeaks.org. That's www.gjspeaks.org. The commission must receive these written comments before the conclusion of the public comment portion of each agenda item. When received, your comments will be read into the record by staff. The order of each public hearing for this evening will be as follows. First, there will be an examination of the application and a determination concerning the adequacy of notification. Then there will be an acknowledgement that planning commissioners have reviewed the presentations on gjspeaks.org, followed by a brief summary of the request by staff. Then there will be an opportunity for staff and applicant to provide any additional information or evidence that have arisen from the public comment or questions submitted from gjspeaks.org. Public comment received to date will be summarized and any audio recording will be read into the record. Any new written public comment submitted through gjspeaks.org should received prior to the close of the public comment will also be read into the record. The Planning Commission may ask questions of staff or the applicant. Public comment section of the hearing may be closed after all public comment has been received. The applicant will be given an opportunity to respond if they desire to do so. Staff may also respond to any statement made by the applicant, public, or the Planning Commission. The chair will then close the public comment portion of the hearing and no further evidence will be accepted. The evidentiary portion may be opened only by a majority vote of the Planning Commission. After the closure of the Planning Commission will begin its deliberation, which will end with the passage of a motion. So with that, the first item up for consideration this evening is the 27, let's see, is that right? One moment, make sure I'm in the right order. The first item up this evening is to consider a request by Eddie at Grand Junction LLC to vacate a 25-foot wide by 400 lineal foot portion of the undeveloped 27.5 road public right-of-way abutting the eastern property line of the property located at approximately 347 27.5 road. Is the applicant here with us for this item this evening?
I am.
Thank you, Mr. Chavone. And are you ready to proceed with tonight's public hearing?
I am.
Thank you. Staff, are you ready to proceed with this item?
I am.
Thank you, Mr. Hawes. Was the required public notice made for this item?
Madam Chair, as indicated in the staff report, notice has been provided in accordance with the code.
Thank you. With that, we can proceed. Please introduce the exhibits for the record.
Madam Chair, tonight we have 5 exhibits for this item. Number 1 is the staff report dated April 14th, 2020. Number 2 is the application packet. Exhibit 3 is the accompanying maps. Exhibit 4 is the ordinance vacating a portion of 27.5 road right-of-way located at approximately 347 27.5 road. And Exhibit 5 is the staff presentation dated April 14th, 2020.
Thank you. Are there any additional exhibits to be added to the record that were not included in the original staff report?
There are none.
Thank you. Please proceed with your presentation. Oh, I'm sorry. Were there the public comments that were received on gjspeaks.org, which it doesn't look like there were any. So those would not be included in the exhibits, correct?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Apologies for that. Have the planning commissioners had a chance to review the pre-recorded presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Seeing an affirmative from all 7 here. Staff, would you please provide a brief overview of this request?
Yes. Madam Chair, Commissioners, just a brief summary of this project. The applicant, Eddie at Grand JCT LLC, seeks to vacate a 400 lineal foot portion of the undeveloped public 27.5 road right-of-way that currently bisects their property in preparation for future development. This request for right-of-way vacation proposal complies with the Grand Valley Circulation Plan and Comprehensive Plan of the City of Grand Junction. Any questions for staff on this one?
I do have a question. Anytime we restrict access to the river, I'm partial to making sure that we've considered all things. So with Las Colonias being literally directly downstream of this, what is the difference between the property that is owned as far as either the city or others being able to close down that boat ramp or access to the river versus if the right-of-way was here that sort of, well, let me make sure that my understanding that it ensures that people have access to the river there. How do those two differentiate? And is this even an issue, or does the project plan to provide some sort of alternative public access easement or otherwise if there is an issue?
Sure. So at time of site plan, Commissioner, then we're looking at continuing to, or rather getting an easement for public access as far as the trail goes. We have not specifically discussed the boat ramp. I'll defer to to Ms. Allen or Mr. Thornton, I think is also in the audience here, just if they have anything else to add. But we are looking at different easements and access options at time of site plan. That's not something that we're totally looking at right now.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Ellers, if I may add, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So just a little bit more. So on this property, by taking away or vacating the 27.5 road right away, there would no longer be public access to the river at this location. But as Mr. Ellers so keenly pointed out, the city has developed public access through actually a formalized boat ramp location just to the or just downriver, just to the west of this location. As Mr. Haas alluded as well, this property does actually have an existing easement through it for public pedestrian access. And so this has always been, I think, for quite some time been contemplated as an essential part of the river trail connection. And so at the time of site plan development, that will certainly be incorporated into any future development proposal and site planning at that time.
So I think you've answered my question, but I'm going to ask it another way just to be certain. Right now, with a right of way going through there, there's relatively unrestricted access, and not even if like a park was closed, would you not be able to access through it? You would have that public right of way. The property that gets down to the boat ramp, that's Las Colonias, I'm assuming that that's, you know, like city-owned property, right? And so that carries some different rights that the city could close it down or restrict access for some reason, and presumably for the betterment of the community. But how does that relate to the right of way here? Is it any different? And again, forgive me for asking these questions, but it is a sensitive area that I'm always cautious to when we take away river access. And if we have other easements going along that, does access to the river, even though in this case currently it's at a 25-foot wide piece, will it be maintained if we vacate this right of way? I said I was going to make that a simpler question. I don't think I did that.
But now I'm confused.
Commissioner Ellers, if I may, I think the question is there any, I guess maybe future concern about closing down, or that the boat ramp and access in Las Colonias gets closed down, and then we wouldn't have access here at 27.5 road. I would say, and I don't use the 27.5 road access point to the river, but I actually suspect that it is not used commonly or with any degree of frequency. And so I think from a public perspective, I think the preference is certainly that we direct our public to access points in the river that have been constructed for that purpose and have been designed to accommodate safe and easy access to the riverfront. I don't believe that the city at this point in time contemplates any type of that improved access through this 27.5 road right-of-way location. So I think you're very accurate and astute at pointing out that we would in theory lose an access point, but it's certainly not in any plans or otherwise contemplated as being a developed point of access to the river.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions for staff?
If I might, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Wade?
Mr. Haas, you mentioned that there's an easement for foot traffic across this property that will remain. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioner, or Vice Chair Wade, excuse me. We do have an easement currently on the property that will remain, that will not be vacated, along with a 27.5 road right of way. This easement is on the southern part of the property, so it will not be affected. This is exclusively the right of way for 27.5 road.
All right, thank you very much.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, Ms.
Jamie
Beard.
Jamie Beard, Assistant City Attorney. Lyndon, I don't know if that easement, though, actually crossed the right of way and was expected to, but I anticipate that it did. It may be that you do want to retain in that area where the easement crosses for trail purposes remains as available access through the right of way that's presently being vacated. Otherwise, we may have a break in the easement.
Madam Chair, Vice Chair Wade and Jamie, we can certainly make that a condition of approval that the existing or that the city currently possesses.
So Landon, will you please say that one more time because you froze up a few times while you were saying that?
Sure. Yeah, we can certainly make, or the commission could certainly make that a condition of approval, that the existing city easement not be vacated along with the right of way.
Technically, if I may, I don't think right now it is an easement because they wouldn't have granted us an easement in our right of way. But I suspect that they may have granted the trail up to the right of way on the one parcel and then picked it up on the other side of the right of way for the other parcel. And basically, I think what you want to do is retain an easement in that area so that the easement across the right of way would be equivalent to what the trail easement is on either side of the right of way. And I don't have a copy of that in front of me, and Ted maybe can explain, but I suspect that that's the case based on my memory, which is many, many years ago, of when the easement was required as a part of the last zoning, or the zoning before last.
Thank you. And we'll ask that question of Mr. Chavone after we finish our questions for staff. Are there any other questions for staff?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Commissioner.
Landon, so are there with,
George, you muted yourself by accident. There
sorry,
you go.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you, sorry. Landon, so will there be two conditions? Is there a condition with Excel?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Gatsos, that's correct. There is a condition, and I can go through that condition again, but it's at the bottom of your staff report, just indicating that Excel has requested an easement roughly on the same portion of property as the right-of-way is right now, and they asked that the granting of that easement be made a condition of approval. That easement, from what I understand, from documents I've received and from Mr. Chavone, is ready to be recorded. Excel and the applicant have worked out all the details and have come to agreement regarding that. So all that needs to be done is to actually record the easement.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for staff?
If I might, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Wade?
Landon, I'm still a little bit confused because from what Jamie has said, we may need to record another easement across the vacation of the right of way to make sure the trail goes all the way through. Should we add that to the ordinance or our proposed motion to make sure that that's done before we approve it?
Madam Chair, Vice Chair Wade, yes, I would concur with Jamie's recommendation that that we go ahead and follow that course of action.
Thank you.
That would result with two conditions.
Two conditions, yeah.
Any
I have one
additional?
more question.
Yep, Commissioner Ehlers.
And I'm going to say this here because I'm not sure what our protocol is, but this is probably more of a question for Mr. Chavone. But ultimately, if this right of way is being replaced with the same alignment for an XL easement, which would encumber and prohibit building and everything else, why should we vacate the right of way? I might guess that it's because of setbacks and a number of things that come along with right of ways in that regard. But does it make more sense to just replace it with some sort of easement or a public access easement if there's already going to be ground that has an access and utility easement for XL and is otherwise encumbered? I think I can certainly see from a project perspective why this makes sense, but maybe maybe Mr. Chabon can kind of help clear that up as well. And that's just coming from, again, a knee-jerk reaction to not want to jump at taking away river access points.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Ellers, I'll defer to Mr. Chabon on that one
Okay.
to answer that. But from a planning perspective, then, yeah, it certainly gives more flexibility as far as setbacks and things like that. And the power easement is necessary to protect existing XL a gas line and overhead power equipment that's there. So the granting of that easement makes sense for us. But again, I'll defer to Mr. Chabon for maybe some more in-depth discussion on why that would be a good idea from the applicant's perspective.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions for staff?
No, ma'am.
Seeing none. Next, we will move into Mr. Chabon's portion. The applicant did not submit a presentation, but I do understand that he may have some questions to answer, and we may also have some additional questions for him. So, Mr. Chabon, will you please introduce yourself for the record?
Yes, my name is Ted Chabon of Chabon Robertson Associates. We are land planners, landscape architects, and we've been working with the Eddy Group on this project for quite a while now, going back to rezone this right-of-way vacation. And not that it's all that pertinent, but we submitted a formal pre-app to the city about a week ago. And so that's moving forward also. I want to address a couple of Commissioner Eller's comments. I don't see this as taking away access, because between the rendering plant being there and Brady Trucking being there, I don't believe this was really used for access. I could be wrong, but I think with those historic uses having been there, with the fencing they had up and those sorts of things, there's no evidence that it's been used that way. And so I would not put it in the context of taking an access away. The idea that were the boat ramp to shut down at Las Colonias for any reason, that boat ramp is huge. It's going to be incredibly popular. It's probably going to demand hundreds of parking spaces. And that sort of impact on this property would be the same as probably needing to purchase all this property. If you were to really want to get that level of boat ramp. So even if it has been used historically, and I don't think it has, it's probably been a car here, a car there. And with regards to river trail access, there is easements on the site. You know, Jamie, in my mind's eye, that easement on the plat that we received did go across the road, but whether that was some sort of error on the surveyor's part, or whether it was an error 5 years ago when Brady gave it up and they did plat across city right away, I can't speak to that. There's no intentions in this project of taking away that pedestrian access along the river. There might be some consideration to realigning it, and that would have to be a win-win for everybody, but not taking it away. That is correct on the Excel easement. That paperwork's went back and forth a few times, and we think it's correct and ready to be filed at the right time. And as far as why vacate, there's certainly the reason of greater setbacks. You can park in any of these easements where you wouldn't be able to necessarily if it was a road right away. But it's more for the function of the uses that are coming forward and what they're trying to achieve. And you know, I'm not sure at the risk of maybe trying to give an example here that's a little more personal and near and dear to Commissioner Ellers. Would you want a public easement going through your RV park to the river? And you don't have to answer that. I'm just saying from a standpoint of developing a project and what your vision was, probably not. And that would be true here too. That's again, you will have the public access. But as far as maintaining it as an open road, that's not desired. Other questions, or did I skip anybody?
Are there other questions for Mr. Chavon? I'm not seeing any. Mr. Chavon, did you have anything else you wanted to tell us about the project?
You know, it's very, very minor, but just because it's in the report stated that 3 properties were going to be combined into one. And actually, again, as when we submitted the right-of-way, that vacation, that was the thinking. It's now probably going to be 2 properties, but again, that should really have no bearing on tonight's decision. It was just something that Landon wasn't even aware of when he wrote his report.
Okay. Any final questions for the applicant? Nope, seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Chavon, for joining us this evening. And at this time, I will open the public hearing up to any additional public comment that may have been received. Mr. Hawes, has any additional public comment been received on GJ Speaks or via the phone?
We have not received any additional public comment, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. And again, we had none submitted on GJ Speaks. So at this time, we'll close the public comment portion of this hearing. And we'll turn it back to the Planning Commission for any additional questions that may have come up during that time. Do we have any additional questions for staff? No? Seeing a lot of heads shaking. So we will then close the public hearing and turn to the Planning Commission for any additional discussion or deliberation.
The only added discussion is really, did we get clarity on any, additional language for making sure that easement, any that pedestrian easements on either side of this right of way ultimately get connected if this right of way vacation somehow disconnects a public corridor?
I see Jamie unmuting her phone. Ms. Beard.
I think you can just add a second condition, and that condition being that with the vacation of the right-of-way, a pedestrian access easement is retained comparable to the pedestrian access easement that already exists on the abutting properties and comparable in size and location.
Okay. So did somebody write that down for the motion?
Would you like me to take a shot at that, Madam Chairman?
I would love you to, if there's no further discussion or any other questions. I'm not seeing any. So if there is no further discussion, the chair will entertain a motion on this item.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Wade.
on the request for right-of-way vacation for an approximate 25-foot by 400 lineal foot portion of the undeveloped 27.5 road abutting the eastern property line of that property located at 347 27.5 road. City file number VAC-2019-459. I move that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to City Council with the findings of facts and conditions. And I specify the second condition to make sure that the trail easement that presently extends across the property on the plat that's been received is reviewed and we make sure that this vacation doesn't eliminate that trail access in either size or location. So I would move that we recommend to approval of the city council with the findings of fact and the conditions as listed in the staff report.
Thank you, Commissioner Wade. I think that motion adequately covers it. Would you agree, Ms. Beard?
Sorry, didn't have to unmute. I would agree that I think that's enough to cover it. At this point in time, you're making a recommendation and things can be clarified between now and then for city council to be sure that the final ordinance includes the language as specified based on discussion here this evening.
Thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. We will be taking the vote via roll call this evening. So if you are in favor of the motion, when I call your name, please signify by saying aye. If you are not in favor, say nay, and we will record it for the record. Commissioner Ehlers.
Aye.
Commissioner Gatzos.
Aye.
Commissioner Scissors.
Aye.
Commissioner Cesares. Commissioner Cesares, you're on mute. There you go.
Anyway, I say aye. Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Teskey.
Aye.
Commissioner Wade.
Aye.
And I am also an aye. The motion carries 7-0. The next item up for consideration this evening is to consider a request by 2R&D LLC to extend for 2 additional years the approved preliminary plan and filing to plat for the Pinnacle Ridge subdivision located east of Mariposa Drive near West Ridges Boulevard. Is the applicant with us this evening for this project?
Yes, Madam Chair, Commission members, thank you. Robert Jones II with Vortex Engineering. Our address is 861 Rood Avenue in Grand Junction.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. And are you ready to proceed with tonight's public hearing?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Staff, are you ready to proceed with this item?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Okay. Oh, Mr. Peterson, I hear you. Oh, there you are.
Yep, there. Mhm.
I hear the voice. Before we proceed with this item, was public notice made pursuant to the city's noticing requirements?
Yes, Madam Chairman, as indicated in the staff report, notice has been provided in accordance with our zoning code.
Thank you. Will you please introduce the exhibits for the record?
Madam Chairman, commission members, item number 1 is my staff report dated today, April 14th of 2020. Item number 2 or exhibit number 2 would be the Planning Commission extension request letter from the applicant. Exhibit number 3 is the site location and zoning maps. Exhibit 4 was the approved preliminary plan. Exhibit number 5 was the limits of development sheet. Exhibit number 6 was the final subdivision plat for filing number 2. Exhibit 7 was emails from Mark Gardner and Mary Orn. And then also 2 additional comments that were also on GJ Speaks from Bradley Bryan and Richard O'Hara that were submitted after 4 o'clock today. And then exhibit 8 would be my staff report presentation dated today, April 14th of 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Are there any additional exhibits to be added to the record?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. It appears to be, well, it's 6:39, so I don't know why somebody's clock is going off, but with that, has the Planning Commission reviewed the pre-recorded presentation for the Pinnacle Ridge subdivision extension request?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Staff, would you please provide a brief overview of this request?
Madam Chairman, Commission members, the applicant, 2R&D LLC, is requesting for the Pinnacle Ridge subdivision an extension for 2 additional years for the approved preliminary plan for the development of 72 single-family lots on a total of 45.11 acres. The applicant is also requesting an additional 2-year extension for the recordation of the approved filing 2 plat for the development of 8 single-family lots within that subdivision. The applicant received administrative approval for the preliminary plan back on April 19th of 2017, and for the final plan for filing 2 on December 11th, also in 2017. The applicant met the approval and recording date for filing 1 by recording the subdivision plat for filing 1 in March of 2018. Consistent with the code, both preliminary plan and the final plan for filing 2 were approved for 2 years, and the director approved an additional 1-year extension to those approvals. The applicant is now requesting extension of the preliminary plan and filing 2 for additional 2-year periods until April 19th of 2022 and December 11th of 2022 respectively. The code provides that additional extensions may be granted by the Planning Commission so long as the plan is consistent with our comprehensive plan and current zoning requirements, which has been found during this review by city staff.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Do we have questions for Mr. Peterson regarding this extension request? Commissioner Ehlers.
Yeah. Scott, can you confirm, I'm reading through the comments as well, and this extension is something that is allowed by our code. It is not an exemption or a variance, correct?
That is correct. Basically, there's nothing being changed to the approved plans, to either the preliminary or the final plan. The code does allow, once we get past the initial 2-year review period plus the 1-year administrative extension, that any additional extensions need to be reviewed and approved by our Planning Commission. So that's per our zoning code.
Thank you.
Additional questions for Mr. Peterson?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Wade.
is it typical, Scott, to after the 1-year administrative thing to give a full 2-year additional extension, or are they normally done 1 year at a time?
Well, we don't really have too many of these, as you're aware. The last one that I'm aware that the city did was at Casas de Luz, but that was a plan development. So that was a different scenario as far as timeframes and stuff. Normally, this is the code allows for 2-year approval rates. And so staff thought that could basically do another 2 years per our code for a preliminary plan review and approval would be the appropriate timeframe for this type of request. And the applicant was agreeable to that 2-year extension.
Thank you.
Additional questions for Mr. Peterson? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. The applicant for this project did not submit a formal presentation, but may like to offer some words and then answer some questions from the Planning Commission, potentially. Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commission members. I appreciate you considering this request. And, you know, especially in the current times that we're in with this COVID-19 crisis, if you will, and impact to our economy, our nation. We certainly appreciate this and would respectfully request this additional time. Just as recently as 2 weeks ago, a closing was canceled on one of the recently completed homes that had been under contract for 3.5, 4 weeks, and 3 additional homes that were set to break ground in March were put on hold, pending all of this. And so we appreciate your considering this, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Do we have questions for the applicant?
Madam
I
Chair,
have one. Go ahead, Bill.
I'm
Let's
sorry.
go to Commissioner Wade, and then we'll go to Commissioner Cesaris afterwards. Commissioner
Mr.
Wade.
Jones, thank you. Mr. Jones, I appreciate you making the statement you just did about the number of homes and potential contracts that have been put on hold. And those are largely on hold because of, I'm sure, the economic changes we've all seen recently. I'm a little bit concerned because I've driven up through there and there has been, almost no activity that I've seen. We obviously don't know about lots that are under contract and then get canceled. Is it your feeling that, and I know you can't guarantee this, but is it your feeling that the applicant intends to go through with both filings 1 and 2 on this property?
Yes, they do. And filing 2 has already been under construction. The grading was completed for filing 2, as well as all of the storm drain work, and about 90% of the sanitary sewer was installed. So in terms of improvements to complete filing 2, it's really very little, basically the curb gutter, sidewalk, and paving.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Commissioner Cesaris.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I was questioning the 3 projects put on hold and the 1 cancellation. Is that because of the virus and perhaps people have lost their jobs, or they're very insecure financially at this point?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Thank you.
Are there additional questions for Mr. Jones? Okay, seeing none. Thank you again, Mr. Jones, for joining us virtually this evening. At this time, I will open up the public hearing to any additional public comment that may have been received. Mr. Peterson, have we had any messages via phone or any additional comments received via gjspeaks.org?
It's just the 4 comments, 2 that were received after 4, and then the other ones that were on GJ Speak. So
Thank you.
I'm not aware of anything else.
Ms. Allen?
Madam Chair, if I may, I just want to verify that everybody had a chance to read all 4. It appears that all 7, according to GJ Speaks, have read the comments from Bradley Bryan and Mary Orn, as well as Mark Gardner. There was a submittal that came in actually at 5:59. So right before the meeting from a Mr. Richard O'Hara, and it doesn't appear that everyone has had a chance. So I want to maybe confirm that. And if not, I would like to take the opportunity to read that into the record.
That'd be great.
But it's a very lengthy one, Ms. Allen, so I would think that it probably ought to be put in the record, obviously.
Excellent. Madam Chair, with that, it is lengthy, so bear with me, but I do want to make sure that you guys all have the benefit of receiving this public comment tonight. So with that, and bear with me, the text is small, but the 2, again, from Mr. Richard O'Hara, 2 R&D LLC has requested a 2-year extension of the preliminary plan for the Pinnacle Ridges development. I ask that the commissioner take the history of this project into consideration when reviewing this request. This development was initially approved in 2007, but was then abandoned for a decade. When the plan was resubmitted in 2017, it was approved with multiple exemptions for codes and standards, including but not limited to the following. The first bullet, the development area is zoned R2, 15,000 square foot per lot, yet the approved plan allowed for cluster development with a minimum of 7,125 square feet per lot. Bullet 2, The plan was approved allowing the use of private streets because some of the proposed streets do not meet standards for public streets. In parentheses, roads as narrow as 20 feet wide and or traversing slopes over 30%. Bullet 3, the plan was approved allowing a street with over 13% upward slope for over 800 feet, even though the GJ Traffic Engineering and Design Standards, TEDS, requires the maximum grade for residential streets be no more than 12% for a maximum of 500 feet. This road also does not meet fire access code requirements, yet an exemption was given on this item as well. Bullet 4, due to the unstable soil, steep slopes, and the fact some roads would not meet standards for public roads, the GJ Community Development Engineering staff originally recommended that the developer provide a 10-year warranty for the roads in the development. The developer objected, and over time, this requirement was reduced to 7 years, then 2 years, and then eventually a 1-year road warranty was all that was required. Bullet 5, the Colorado Geological Survey, CGS, professional staff has repeatedly provided opinions to the city that it has yet to be established that the slope and soils are stable enough to support the proposed project. The CGS also supported the original recommendation that developer provide a 10-year warranty on the roads. These issues were previously reviewed, and thus I do not raise these items to relitigate them. The point is that this project now spans at least 13 years, and the developer has been given a tremendous amount of latitude in its development. Developer has already received 1 extension on the current plan and now asks for 2 more years, what are described as unforeseen construction delays and economic reasons. As to the construction issues, the developer and his engineers previously provided testimony with detailed construction plans and gave their assurances to the Planning Commission and City Council that this development could be built as planned. In regard to economic issues, it is unclear what the developer is referring to that would have prevented him from proceeding over the last 3 years. Home sales in the Grand Valley have increased significantly since 2017. Per the GJL Sentinel on February 20th, 2020, the local housing inventory continues to drop, and in quote, January inventory numbers are the lowest for the month since at least 2013, end of quote. When announcing his plan, the developer is quoted as saying home prices, end quote, are expected to start around $250,000 and up, end of quote. GJ Sentinel on March 15th, 2015. However, the 2 homes that have been built were both listed as $499,000. It is a questionable argument to say that developers underestimating building costs by 100% counts as an unplanned economic factor. In parentheses, it is recognized that issues related to the COVID outbreak could potentially impact real estate sales, yet this is a recent event which is unrelated to economic or construction issues over the past 3 years, into parentheses. In closing, I would ask the Commission to consider why it seems there is no limit to the exemptions and exceptions given to this developer and how many accommodations will be required for this developer to get on with it. One would think that 13 years is sufficient to get going with this project, period. Thank you for your consideration. That is the end of the public testimony at this point.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Mr. Jones, is there anything in the public comment that we've received that you would like to respond to?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Mr. Wahara is mistaken on so many different points. I wouldn't want to take the time to go through those. Obviously, this project, as planned and as reviewed and approved over a series of years, has encountered some economic downturns, as was experienced in 2008, 2009, when it originally was approved and planned to move forward, and spent some time in re-review, and it was picked back up. And now with this present issue that we're facing with the COVID-19, I seem to think that it would only be right to grant the developer some latitude. There's really nothing changing with the plan as it was reviewed and approved. This is just simply a request for an extension, and we would respectfully request that.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Do we have any additional questions for Mr. Jones from the Planning Commission? Seeing none. Thank you. At this time, we will close the public comment portion of this hearing. Are there any additional questions that have percolated to the top from Planning Commission to staff? Okay, I'm not seeing any or hearing any, seeing any mouths moving who are on mute, so I think we're okay there. At this time, we'll close the public hearing and turn to the Planning Commission for additional discussion, deliberation, and a motion.
Madam Chairman,
Commissioner Wade.
public hearing, when we had it, because there were lots of people who were concerned about the developments on those hillsides and everything. And we went through considerable deliberation and approved the project. And we've run into completely unforeseen circumstances. And I, for one, feel like we ought to give any developer who's got a project in process as much of a break as we can in situations like this because of the economic uncertainty. I have to tell you that I don't really, well, I intend to vote in favor of the extension. I would prefer to see the extension be for a year and have the developer have to come back in another year. My concern is that I think that what we've got now, while economically it really does impact the development and people who have places under contract and decide not to do anything, there has been an awful lot of time that's passed with very little construction up there. And I'm concerned that if we just give a blanket approval for 2 years, it's going to go another 2 years and we'll be back to look for some kind of extension at that point. Now, I know there's a lot of money invested in this, and I know the developer wants to build it, and I would like to see it built. I'm just uncomfortable with extending it for more than a year without another review.
Thank you, Commissioner Wade. Other discussion?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Gatzos.
I understand Commissioner Wade's view there because there hasn't been a lot of movement. I'm in favor of giving the developer an extension, of course, to follow through. And I think we all want him or her and the association to be successful. Now, Bill, my only concern would be if we go to a year, I think the COVID virus still economically is pretty unknown. We may be dealing with it for a good part of this year. That wouldn't give him a lot of time or give that person a lot of time as a developer, I think.
That is a good point, Commissioner Gatzos. I would agree with you. My concern is more that I've watched that project since its inception. And I think we have to grant an extension. I just think somehow we have to make it very clear, whatever the length of the extension we might grant, that we're just not going to stamp this every time they come back for another extension.
Yeah. Can I ask a question to our legal counsel?
Sure.
Jamie, is it possible to somehow say that we would give a 2-year extension, but we'd like the developer to come back in 12 months and give a report to council? As to
Technically, I think you can ask for a report, but if you're granting the extension of 2 years, then technically there is a 2-year extension. If you're wanting something to show if you're going to have to consider another extension in the future, then you may want to give some information to the developer at this time as to what you really expect to happen in the next 2 years before you would seriously consider another extension if they happen to come back.
good, you answered my question. Thank you.
I might comment that I'd be leery of a requirement like that. I think if we were looking at something that was a variance or an exception or something that wasn't otherwise already allowed by our code, something along those lines could be more favorable here. And I might just add a comment that, this is a unique property, and fortunately we've identified what the challenges are with slopes and soils and everything else. So making sure that it takes its time to get it done right, I think is more important than just jamming it through. And fortunately our code seems to have had the forethought, either intentionally or by chance, to help provide that without requiring us to take an exception or a variance approach to that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do we have other comments or discussion?
I would just say that I would agree with Commissioner Eller's comments there. Even in the best of times, a project like this is really challenging, and it's more important to do it methodically and correctly. But right now with the COVID situation, and I agree with Commissioner Getkos that it's probably going to go on, well beyond a year. And I think as long as the 2-year extension is already something that is allowed, this of all times would be the wrong time to resist that.
Thank you, Commissioner Scissors. Commissioner Cesaris, did you have a comment? You're on mute, so you'll need to unmute. Commissioner Cesaris, you're still on mute. There you go.
Am I okay?
You're okay.
Okay. I would like to say I support Commissioner Gatso's comments. I think 1 year is not long enough. With this economic condition, we hopefully by 2 years, the conditions will be different and this project will be moving forward, and then we'd be more willing to extend it another 2 years if we needed to at that point. Also, in reading the letters of complaint about the project driving snakes, et cetera, on their yards, I live in the middle of Grand Junction and I have snakes in my yard every year. And also we have skunks in our neighborhood. So, and there's no new construction going on in our area.
But do you have scorpions, Mr. Cesaris?
I haven't found one yet, but I have found them in another home I owned at a time. So, but anyway, I support the 2-year extension.
Thank you, Commissioner Cesaris. Do we have any other comments or discussion?
Chairman Reese, if I may, I just wanted to clarify something I heard from one of the commissioners earlier. Just wanted to make sure to remind you that in this case, you actually are the final decision maker. It's not actually a recommendation to City Council on this decision for extension.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Any other comments or discussion?
I have a motion.
Oh, okay. Commissioner Gatsos.
Unless anybody wants to talk here. Madam Chairman, on the Pinnacle Ridge subdivision request to amend the expiration date of the approved preliminary plan and filing to recording date, city file numbers SUB 2015-120 and SUB 2017-273. I move that the Planning Commission approve the requested 2-year extension for the preliminary plan until April 19, 2022, and a 2-year extension of filing 2 until December 11, 2022.
I second the motion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, as per before, I will be calling a roll call vote. If you are in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. If you are not in favor, please say nay. Commissioner Ehlers.
Aye.
Commissioner Gatsos.
Aye.
Commissioner Scissors.
Aye.
Commissioner Cesaris.
Aye.
Commissioner Teskey.
Aye.
Commissioner Wade.
For heaven's sakes, aye.
Thank you. And I am also an aye. So the motion passes 7-0. The next item up for consideration this evening is to consider a request by Kyle Berger and Mark Beckner to rezone 3 properties of a total of 10.86 acres, currently R1, which is residential 1 dwelling unit per acre, RE, residential estate, and RR, residential rural zone districts, to an R2, residential 2 dwelling units per acre zone district located at 2574 and 2576 Tahoe Drive and an adjacent unaddressed property. Is the applicant with us this evening for this item?
Yeah, hi, you got Mark Beckner here.
Hi, thank you for being here with us this evening. Are you ready to proceed with tonight's public hearing?
Let's do it. Sounds fun.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Staff, are you ready to proceed with this item?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Oh, there you are. Before you do so, has the public notice been completed pursuant to the city's noticing requirements?
Yes, Madam Chair, as indicated in the staff report, notice has been provided in accordance with the code.
Thank you, Mr. Gloss. Will you please introduce the exhibits for the record?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Oh, yes.
Madam Chair, if I may, I hate to interrupt, but as I mentioned during our workshop on this matter, my firm has had some involvement with this project. Mr. Beckner, who works at my law firm, has had some involvement here, and not because there's any actual pecuniary gain to be had by me in deciding this matter. I think it would be perhaps an appearance of impropriety for me to sit and make a decision on this rezone request. So I think I'm going to recuse myself from this one and let you all take it from here.
Okay. Thank you.
Andrew, I'm going to put you in the waiting room if that's okay. This is Bella.
That sounds lovely.
Okay, I'm going to put you in the waiting room and then I'll accept you back into the meeting when we're ready to have you rejoin.
Perfect.
Okay.
Fellow commissioners, make a note. Don't offend Bella. You're going to end up in the waiting room.
I wonder if there's candy and water in the waiting room. So now that we've taken care of that order of business, will you please introduce the exhibits for the record, Mr. Gloss?
Yes, Madam Chair. Exhibit number 1 is the development application packet dated August 27, 2019. Exhibit number 2 are maps and locations. Exhibit number 3 is the proposed ordinance. Exhibit number 4 is the staff report dated April 14th, 2020. Exhibit number 5 is the staff presentation dated today, April 14th, 2020.
Thank you. Are there any additional exhibits to add to the record that were not included in the staff report?
Yes, Madam Chair. There is exhibit number 6, emails from Sandra Adcox, and those are on GJ Speaks and have been viewed by all 7 commissioners.
Thank you. With that, please, actually, I'm sorry. Has Planning Commission reviewed all of the pre-recorded presentations for this item?
Yes.
Yes.
And has been stated, it appears we've all viewed the comment that we did receive. So thank you for doing that. Mr. Gloss, will you please provide a brief overview of this request?
Yes, Madam Chair. The applicants, Kyle Berger and Mark Beckner, are requesting a rezone of 3 properties totaling 10.86 acres located at 2576 Tahoe Drive, 2574 Tahoe Drive, and an adjacent unaddressed parcel, which is less than 1/10 of an acre and consists mostly of an open storm drain. Those parcels are currently zoned RR, or residential rural, RE, residential estate, and R1, residential 1 dwelling unit per acre, respectively. And the proposal is to rezone all 3 to an R2, or residential 2 dwelling units per acre zone district. This rezone request comes in anticipation of a simple subdivision to adjust boundary lines for these properties and an additional property located to the northeast at 2591 G Road. And that subdivision request is being considered separately under administrative review. The requested rezone to R2 is consistent with the comprehensive plan, specifically the future land use designation of residential low for these properties. And staff finds that the proposal has met 3 of the 5 criteria listed in the development code for a rezone. Only one of those criteria is required to be met, and therefore staff recommends approval.
Thank you, Mr. Gloss. Are there questions for staff at this time? I have a question, Mr. Gloss. Can you, I'm looking at the map on my other screen here of the property. Can you discuss access points a little bit so I can better understand how the property is accessed?
Certainly. If you'll allow me to share my screen, hopefully this works so I can show everyone the map that I believe you're looking at. Let's see. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. So you'll see the 3 parcels here. One is labeled RE here, and that has a narrow access directly to Tahoe Drive. And then another parcel is currently zoned RR. It's that larger property that consists mostly of a field. That had previously taken access from G Road, and that access was closed in a previous subdivision request, which was approved in 2018. And that was closed for safety reasons. There's a hill there at that access point. So that property now also takes access from Tahoe Drive, which is that sub-street accessed there off of Capota Street, which is labeled. And then you'll see that 3rd parcel that's involved there, which is the little triangle of R1 along the storm drain there. And there's no direct frontage onto a public right-of-way, nor is there an access easement, to my knowledge, that provides access to that property. But because it is owned by the owners of the other parcels, it has been accessed that way in the past.
And Mr. Gloss, do you know if there's any future plans to try to extend like F3/4 or some other road to this property from off of 26?
Sure. So a local road network is anticipated to develop as these properties bounded by 26 and G and Capota develop over time. The exact configuration would be dependent largely on the order of development there and the exact plans for development. This rezone request to R2 would allow residential development in the future, which is also allowed under the existing zoning, although pretty severely limited by the residential rural zoning there. But to the question of internal access here, the intent of Tahoe Drive being stubbed to this property, which is that, again, that small stub street off of Capota, is to allow that future connection. And so we anticipate that over time, an internal access network would develop that would connect G Road, 26 Road, and Capota. And then potentially, as you're saying, F3/4 or Galley Lane. But again, that really depends on the order of development for these properties in the future.
Thank you. And I would just go on the record, being a resident in this area, I would also suggest that it is an extremely good idea that access not be directly at that hill on G Road, because it is an extremely dangerous hill. So I am glad to hear that access at that point has been closed for this property, because I've seen many accidents happen right there. So I'm glad to hear that. Are there other questions for staff?
If I might, Madam Chairman.
Commissioner Wade.
Lance, in the one exhibit from Sandra Adcox, she talks about something she refers to as rooted gypsy, and I can't figure out what that is. I've been out there and I still can't figure out what that is.
Commissioner Wade, Chair Reese. Rooted Gypsy is the name of a agricultural business or community supported ag or CSA that operates and has operated for quite some time on the property here. As you can see, the property is currently zoned residential rural, consists largely of a field, and that is used for pasture. There's also a greenhouse located on the G Road property at 2591G. And so that business, Rooted Gypsy, sources products from both on-site and historically elsewhere, and in the past has aggregated those properties at this site for delivery. Now, given the residential zoning here and the scope of the uses that are allowed under that agricultural use, which is allowed in both the current zoning and the proposed zoning, we worked with the applicant to bring Rooted Gypsy into compliance with the limitations of that use. So Rooted Gypsy continues to produce products here and continues to take products off-site that are produced on the property, but they have moved the rest of their distribution operation to the Grand Junction Business Incubator. That may be more detailed than you were interested in, but the Rooted Gypsy is that business related to the farming operation here.
Thank you. That is exactly the detail I was hoping I'd get.
Are there additional questions for staff? Seeing none. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Gloss. Let's see. The applicant did not submit a formal presentation for this particular item, but is with us this evening. Do we have any questions for the applicant? Nope. Seeing a lot of head shaking. Would the applicant like to say a few words about this project?
Hey, if there's no questions, it's best just to move on, right?
Yes, wise advice. Wise
Talk about
advice.
anything you want, but I don't have anything to offer.
Okay, thank you. Last call for questions for the applicant. Okay, I am seeing none. Are there any, at this time, we will close the, oh, I'm sorry. At this time, I will open the public hearing up for any additional public comment that may not have been received or that may have been received. Staff has any additional public comment been received on GJ Speaks or via the phone?
I would defer to our Community Development Director, Tamara Allen, on that.
Thank you.
Chairman Reese, I actually just checked GJ Speaks and nothing else has come in, and we have not received anything via phone on this project.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. At this time, we will close the public comment portion of the hearing. And as we've had no questions, there's nothing for the applicant to respond to at this time. So we'll close the public hearing and ask for any discussion and deliberation from the Planning Commission on this item.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Gatzos.
this question is for the staff. Lance, I think in the report that I read, you on the criteria, you had the staff report said that 2, 3, and 5 have been met. Is that right?
That is correct, Commissioner Gatzos.
Thank you.
I do have one question. I apologize. Now, this is just the rezone, right? And although you have the a plat that shows what this subdivision might look like, or I'm sorry, maybe you don't, but in the application, they show what the 4 lots will get reworked to. That's not part of this process, right? That'll be a separate process?
That is correct.
Okay. So noted, and yet, if I understand correctly, the ensuing process is administrative. So I'm compelled to say that from a community standpoint, I'd like staff to have a discussion or consider having a discussion with the applicant upon that rezone. that if this is a property near infrastructure, and that if our master plan is calling for zones like R2, that amount of, getting the efficient configuration and densities available in those kinds of zones is important. So whereas lot 2 is 7.944 acres instead of 8 acres, that's the difference between being able to create 3 lots under R2 versus 4 lots. And I think from a community standpoint, having not creating inefficient properties is in all of our best interest there. So perhaps consider what the pluses and minuses of that are. Taking that under.
Commissioner Ellers, if I can just respond with a clarification, I appreciate that. And I also just want to underscore that the math is actually the inverse of that. So R2 allows 2 dwelling units per acre, not 1 dwelling unit per 2 acres. So at a maximum density, excluding land that goes to other purposes, 7 acres could be 14 dwelling units, not 3 or 4.
Thank you for the correction on that, math, and the concept I would say holds true as far as not trying to gain a developer any more or less lots or create any friction there. I'm just trying to consider the efficiency of our limited lands that we have left within city limits where infrastructure is available. So yeah, again, thank you for that, and maybe just consider that better efficiencies could be available in future opportunities if we took a look at that.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Ehlers. Do we have additional questions or discussion? Seeing none. Miss Allen, did you have anything? Okay. You're on mute, Miss Allen. Okay. All right, so. Okay. I'm trying to read everybody's faces and anticipate the burning question that's inside of each of you. So are there any additional items of discussion on this rezone request before we entertain a motion? Okay, thank you. With that, the chair will entertain a motion.
Chairman Reese, I will suggest the motion. Madam Chairman, on the rezone request RZN-2019-585, I move that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval for the rezone of 3 parcels at 2576 Tahoe Drive, 2574 Tahoe Drive, and an adjacent unaddressed parcel from a RE residential estate, RR residential rural, and R1 residential 1 dwelling unit per acre zone district to a R2 residential 2 dwelling per acre zone district with the finding of fact listed in the staff report.
Second the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Scissors. We have a motion and Commissioner Cesaris has the second. Thank you, Commissioner Cesaris. Any further discussion? Seeing none, again, we will do a roll call vote. If you are in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. If you are opposed, say nay. Commissioner Ehlers.
Aye.
Commissioner Gatzos.
Aye.
Commissioner Scissors.
Aye.
Commissioner Cesaris.
Aye.
Commissioner Teskey is recused. Commissioner Wade.
Aye.
And I am also an aye on this item. So that is a 6-0 vote and the motion does pass. The next item up for consideration this evening.
Madam Chairman, we need to get Commissioner Eske back up in the penalty box.
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Teskey, welcome back.
I'm back.
It's nice to have you back. I hope the waiting room was enjoyable.
It was. There was very little going on in the waiting room.
Still no time.
So the next item up for consideration this evening is to consider a request by the City of Grand Junction for a rezone / amendment to the Planned Development Zone District and Outline Development Plan ODP for the riverfront at Dos Rios located on the northeast bank of the Colorado River between Highway 50 and Hale Avenue. Ms. Ashbeck, are you ready to proceed with tonight's public hearing?
Yes, I am, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And was there required public notice made for this item?
Yes, as indicated in the staff report, notice has been provided in accordance with our code.
Thank you. Will you please introduce the exhibits for the record?
Okay, the first exhibit is the staff report dated April 14th, 2020. That includes maps and the proposed ordinance. And exhibit 2 is the presentation that was dated April 14th, 2020 also.
Thank you. Are there any additional items to be added to the exhibits that were not included in the staff report?
Yes, we received one public comment received on GJ Speaks, and it has now been included as exhibit 3 in the record.
Thank you very much. Has the Planning Commission had a chance to review the pre-recorded presentation for this item?
Yes.
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 Okay, thank you. Ms. Ashbeck, will you please provide a brief overview of the request?
Sure. The applicant is the City of Grand Junction, and we're requesting approval, and as you stated, an amendment to the plan development PD zoning, as well as an amendment to the ODP, or outline development plan, to add approximately 8.4 acres of property to the riverfront at Dos Rios plan development, to add an access point on that ODP off of the Riverside Parkway, and to eliminate an area that was originally planned to be a public parking lot. A year ago, the city approved Ordinance 4898, which included the ODP that established the uses, standards, and general configuration of the proposed riverfront at Dos Rios mixed-use development. That was a total of about 58.8 acres at that time. And since then, the city has acquired additional properties, as well as there is a remnant property on the east side of the Riverside Parkway. And the city is requesting to include all of those, which are currently zoned IO, to include those within the PD for the Dos Rios development. Staff found that the proposal meets both the ODP and rezone criteria in the code and recommends approval of the request.
Thank you, Ms. Ashbeck. Are there questions for Ms. Ashbeck at this time?
Oh, ma'am.
Ms. Ashbeck, is the new piece on the east side of Riverside Parkway, is that the rail yard?
No.
Okay.
Would you like me to show a map or?
No, I'm looking. I have the map up in front of me.
It's adjacent to the rail yard.
Okay.
It's sort of a no man's land. I believe that it's remnant from our acquisitions we did for the Riverside Parkway. And it was just extra property on that east side.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions for Ms. Ashbeck?
Is the only reason that we didn't include it in the original ODP simply because the city did not own it?
On the east side, that parcel?
Any of these additional
Well,
parcels?
the ones on the west side of the parkway, yet we did not own them at that time. We approved the ODP last year. On the east side, I think we sort of looked at the parkway as sort of being a border there. But in looking at it this year and how development is going out there, we wanted to go ahead and include that one in the ODP as well. But we've owned it since probably 2005, 2006.
Ms. Ashbeck, how would that east chunk of property be accessed?
There currently is, I believe, a curb cut off of the Riverside Parkway into that area because it also accesses the tanks that are just to the sort of southeast of that piece.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions from Ms. Ashbeck? Seeing none. Let's see. At this time, I will open the public hearing up to any additional public comment that may have been received. Ms. Ashbeck or Ms. Allen, do you know if any additional comments have been received via GJ Speaks or through the phone?
Miss, I'll defer to Director Allen.
Yep, Madam Chair, I just did a refresh here and it does not appear that there are any additional comments that have been submitted on this item.
Thank you very much. At this time, we will close the public comment portion of the hearing. Have any planning commissioners come up with any additional thoughts or questions to ask on this item during that 30-second time period? No, okay, just checking. At this time, we'll close the public hearing and turn to the Planning Commission for any discussion, deliberation, and a motion.
Madam Chairman,
Commissioner Wade?
on the rezone and amendment to plan development, PD with a BP default zone district and an outline development plan for a mixed-use development known as the Riverfront at Dos Rios. City file number PLD-2020-121. I move that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to City Council with the findings of fact as listed in the staff report.
Thank you, Commissioner Wade. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Gatsos. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, we will do a roll call vote. If you are in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. If you are opposed, please say nay. Commissioner Ehlers.
Aye.
Commissioner Gatsos.
Aye.
Commissioner Scissors.
Aye.
Commissioner Cesaris.
Aye.
Commissioner Teskey.
Aye.
Commissioner Wade.
Aye.
I am also an aye on this item. So this motion passes 7-0. The next item up for consideration this evening is to consider a request by Terry DeHera to vacate an approximate 30-foot wide by 675 feet long portion of 26 5/8 road abutting the northeastern property line of the property located at 359 29 5/8 road. Is the applicant here with us this evening for this item?
Yeah, yes, I am.
Mr. Chavone, thank you again for sticking with us. Are you ready to proceed with the public hearing for this item?
I am.
Thank you. Staff, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Mr. Peterson, was the required public notice made for this item?
Yes, Madam Chairman, as indicated in the staff report, notice has been provided in accordance with our zoning code.
Thank you. Will you please introduce the exhibits for the record?
Madam Chairman, exhibit number 1 is the staff report dated today, April 14th of 2020. Exhibit number 2 is the site location, aerial and zoning maps. Exhibit 3 is the submittal application dated January 27th of 2020. Exhibit 4 is the neighborhood meeting notes and the sign-in sheet. Exhibit 5 would be the vacation ordinance that would be forwarded on to City Council. Exhibit 6 would be the comments that have been received in GJ Speaks and by private emails from Mark and Ed Gardner, and then also Brianne Leota and Bruce Queen. And exhibit number 7 would be my staff report or staff PowerPoint presentation, also dated today, April 14th of 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Are there any additional exhibits to be added to the record that were not included in the original staff report?
Not that I'm aware of, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Before we begin, has the Planning Commission had a chance to review all of the pre-recorded presentations and materials for this item?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes? Okay, great. Mr. Peterson, will you please provide a brief overview of this request?
Madam Chairman, the applicant is Terry D. Herrera, is requesting the vacation of an approximate 30-foot wide by 675-foot long portion of public right-of-way of 29 5/8 road in anticipation of future residential subdivision development for the proposed Goose Down subdivision to be located at 359, 29, and 5/8 Road. The request is to vacate is consistent with our city's comprehensive plan and also our circulation plan. Staff has determined the review criteria, that all 6 of the review criteria as identified within the staff report have been met with this application. So that concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Do we have questions for staff at this time?
Yes. Wade, do you want to go?
No, I said no, Ken, please go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Scott, thank you. I did have one question, and that would be in the analysis section of your report, number 4, talks about adverse impacts on health and safety. And in some of the letters from the neighbors, there was a concern about farm equipment that might end up having to go down their streets in the subdivision. And I don't know, that sounds like it might fall under the category of safety to me. So could you address that, please?
Yes, can you see my aerial photo?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So the request, the request is to vacate 30 feet of that 60-foot right-of-way, as you can see on this exhibit. With the requested vacation, there still would be additional 30 feet of right-of-way that still would remain in that area. And so depending on timeframes of the proposed subdivision, or if the subdivision would be constructed, the neighboring properties to the south and to the east would still have access to that 30-foot wide right-of-way that would not be vacated. So does that answer your question, Scissors?
Well, that gives me some numbers, but I don't know how wide this equipment is or whether 30 feet is adequate. So I guess that would, I would just want some reassurance that remaining easement would be adequate for that type of equipment in terms of safety.
Yeah, to give you some perspective as far as width and so forth, a normal like city alley in the downtown area would be like about 20 foot wide with like a 16-foot wide asphalt path width. So, depending on, the gravel surface area, 30 feet should be more than sufficient for, farm equipment.
Okay, thank you.
Are there additional questions for staff? And that was the question I was going to comment on, was the comment from Mr. Bruce Queen regarding farm equipment. So thank you for answering that.
You bet.
Are there other questions for Mr. Peterson? Mr. Peterson, what protections are there to ensure that the 30-foot right-of-way that will continue to exist will not be eliminated at some point in the future?
Well, at some point in the future, if you want to look at the screen again, this property here would develop into some type of subdivision. So the requirement for this subdivision it would come through to vacate that remaining 30 feet, then also basically construct the right of way in the north-south on 29 and 5/8 Road. As you can see, 29 and 5/8 Road currently is platted right of way to the east of this triangle shaped property. And that would intersect with C and 3/4 Road. So the anticipated future alignment would be to eliminate this curvature and go in more of a T intersection between C and 3/4 and 29 and 5/8.
That makes a lot of sense.
So in the future, that's the route that the city transportation and our public works department is looking at, for the future.
Thank you.
Madam
Are there,
Chair,
yes.
Can I ask Scott? So in the future, they would have 2 access points, north and south on 29 and 5/8 Road, right?
Well, they would have, if this property, when and if that develops, they would have this north-south access. This remaining 30 feet would be removed. And then if Goose Down subdivision would be constructed, there would also be access through the subdivision out to 29 and 5/8 Road and, some form to the east.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Are there additional questions for Mr. Peterson? Seeing none, thank you for your presentation. Mr. Chavone, would you like to make any comments on this particular project?
Keeping it brief, we spent a long time with city staff on getting a confirmation that this right-of-way should be vacated, and because it affects the design of the subdivision. And so we are doing this with the support of the development engineers and city staff, as well as it meeting the circulation plan. That's helpful to us. If we could go back quickly to the aerial photo map. And I don't think you need to give me any control, but when we were at the neighborhood meeting and this was brought up, if you look at where 29 and 5/8 terminates, it's into a big ag field. And that ag field is, according to the owner, better accessed by C1/2 to the east there. And if you look at the other ag field that's above there, it too should have ability from C1/2, whether that's worked out with the neighbor or not, I don't know. But that was a level of comfort that came to us at the neighborhood meeting. But as Scott says, the road is still wide enough if people choose to come down the diagonal road.
Thank you for pointing that out. I did not notice that it ended in the middle of nowhere. So it actually seems like this might improve access. Do we have questions for Mr. Chavone? Seeing none. Again, thank you, Mr. Chavone, for sticking out with us here this evening. At this time, we will open the public hearing up to any additional public comment that may have been received. Mr. Peterson or Ms. Allen, have any additional comments been received on GJ Speaks or via the phone?
Yeah, Chairman Reese, we have not received any additional comments. I did want to just perhaps verify amongst the commission that they have had the opportunity to review the 4 comments that were received via GJ Speaks earlier today.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. It sounds like everybody has, and those were the comments received by Mr. Mark Gardner, Mr. Ed Gardner, Mr. Bruce Queen, and Brianna Leota, who also supplied a letter with that. So thank you for that confirmation. I don't have any other comments at this point in time that have come in.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. At this time, we'll close the public comment portion of this hearing. Are there any final questions for staff or the applicant from the Planning Commission? Seeing none. Okay, we will close the public hearing and turn to the Planning Commission for any additional discussion, deliberation, and/or motion.
Madam Chair, I have a motion.
Commissioner Gatzos.
I'd like to make a motion, Madam Chairman, on the request to vacate an approximately 675 lineal foot portion of 29 and 5/8 road located at 359 29 and 5/8 road, city file number VAC 2020-51. I move that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to City Council with the findings of fact as listed in the staff report.
Thank you, Commissioner Gatzos. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, I will call a roll call vote for this item. If you are in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. If you are opposed, please signify by saying nay. Commissioner Ehlers,
Aye.
Commissioner Gatzos,
Aye.
Commissioner Scissors,
Aye.
Commissioner Cesaris,
Aye.
Commissioner Teske,
Aye.
Commissioner Wade,
Aye.
and I am also an aye, so that motion carries 7-0. The next item up, for consideration this evening is to consider a request by the City of Grand Junction to amend Title 21 of the Grand Junction Municipal Code to modify and clarify provisions governing the planned development PD zone district. Ms. Ashbeck, are you ready to proceed with the public hearing on this item? You are on mute, ma'am.
I am ready to proceed, though.
Thank you. Before we do so, was the required public notice made on this item?
Yes, as indicated in the staff report, notice was provided in accordance with the code.
Thank you. Will you please introduce the exhibits for the record?
All right. Exhibit 1 is the staff report dated April 14th, 2020, which has included the proposed ordinance. Exhibit 2 is the staff presentation dated April 14th, 2020.
Thank you. Are there any additional exhibits to be added to the record that were not included in the original staff report?
Yes, one public comment was received on GJ Speaks, and it's now included as Exhibit 3 of the record.
Thank you. And were all the planning commissioners able to read that comment on GJ Speaks?
Yes.
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 Thank you.
Madam Chair, I don't know if it's important, but there are actually 2 public comments on.
There are 2 public comments, which I assume Ms. Allen will read into the record, but we can go ahead and introduce the second public comment into the record at this time. It appears that Mr. Chavone actually made 2 public comments. Thank you for commenting. Ms. Allen, would you like to read that into the record?
I certainly can. I believe it appears that everybody has read the first comment that was submitted as of last night. So I will read in the second comment, also received by Mr. Ted Chavone. And it says, consider this an amendment to my first long-winded comment that focused on hillside regulations. The additional proposed changes to reduce conflicts in the code between PDs and other regulations, the allowance of changes to bulk standards, the ability to increase a phasing schedule, all are valid changes being requested. I support these changes as well, period.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. So we'll introduce that comment into the record. Let's see. So we've reviewed all the recorded materials and presentations. Ms. Ashbeck, will you please provide a brief overview of the request?
Yes, Madam Chair. The Community Development Director is proposing amendments to sections of the Zoning and Development Code to modify and clarify provisions governing the planned development or PD zone district. The amendments proposed address deviation to standards allowed within the PD zone district and the schedule and validity of an approved outline development plan or ODP. There really aren't any criteria for a review of an amendment like this. but the reasons for the amendment are given in the staff report. Staff recommends approval of the code amendment. And that concludes my summary.
Thank you, Ms. Ashbeck. And for the record, the Planning Commission has discussed these zoning code amendments in length over a number of weeks, which is outlined in the staff report. So I think they have had thorough discussion and vetting prior to this public hearing. Are there any questions for Ms. Ashbeck? Seeing none. And outside of the second public comment that Mr. Chavone made on GJ Speaks, were there any additional public comments received via GJ Speaks or the phone?
I would defer to Director Allen.
Chairman Reese, we have not received any additional comments at this point. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So with that, we'll close the public comment portion of this hearing. And are there any questions that Planning Commission has had come to mind during that time period? As I said, I feel like these have been well evaluated, well thought out, proposed changes that I think are helpful in modifying our code and making it more consistent throughout. So I'm certainly in favor of these changes. If seeing no other questions, we will close the public hearing and turn to the Planning Commission for any additional discussion, deliberation, and/or motion.
Chairman Reese, I would just add and echo for the record that we have looked through these as a planning commission and vetted them out over a period of time. And these amendments have kind of come up as we've identified areas of our code that could be better defined. And I think this does a good job of doing that. And also, making some adjustments to some of those areas where an otherwise attempt at doing a one-size-fits-all policy, when you come down to a PD, which is usually an application that has some level of uniqueness, these adjustments here seem to be quite fitting to what the intent is.
Thank you, Commissioner Ehlers. Are there any other comments or discussion?
I echo Commissioner Ehlers' comments and agree with them, and I'd like to go ahead and make a motion. Madam Chair, on the Zoning and Development Code Amendments ZCA-2020-121, I move that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval with the findings of fact as listed in the staff report.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Scissors. We have a motion and Commissioner Wade has a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we will call a roll call vote. Those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Those opposed, nay. Commissioner Ehlers.
Aye.
Commissioner Gatzos.
Aye.
Commissioner Scissors.
Aye.
Commissioner Cesaris.
Aye.
Commissioner Teskey.
Aye.
Commissioner Wade.
Aye.
I am also an aye, so that motion carries 7-0. The final item on our agenda for this evening is to consider a request by the City of Grand Junction to amend Title 21 of the Grand Junction Municipal Code regarding setbacks in the B1 Neighborhood Business Zone District. Mr. Hawes, are you ready to proceed with tonight's public hearing?
I am, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And before we do so, was there required public notice made for this item?
As indicated in the staff report, notice has been provided in accordance with the code.
Thank you. Will you please introduce the exhibits for the record?
I will. Madam Chair, Commissioners, for this item, we have 3 exhibits. Exhibit 1 is the staff report dated April 14th, 2020. Exhibit 2 is the ordinance amending the mixed use and industrial bulk standards summary table. And Exhibit 3 is the staff presentation dated April 14th, 2020.
Thank you. Are there any additional exhibits to add to the record that were not included in the original staff report?
There are none.
Okay, thank you. Were the planning commissioners able to review the pre-recorded video and documents for this item?
Yes.
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 Thank you. Mr. Hawes, if you'll give us just a brief overview of this request.
Sure, Madam Chair, Commissioners. The brief summary on this item is that staff proposes to reduce the front setback in the B1 neighborhood business zone district from 20 to 15 feet. This would bring the setback into conformity with other similar commercial and industrial zones in the city and would further the purpose of the zone district expressly for the intent to design and scale with surrounding uses and to provide small areas for office and professional services. In addition, the request would implement certain goals and policies of the comprehensive plan.
Thank you for that overview. Are there any questions for staff at this time? Oh, I'm sorry. No. Were you all finished?
I am finished, Madam
Oh,
Chair.
okay. I'm sorry. I thought I cut you off.
No, you're fine.
Are there any questions for Mr. Hawes? Again, I would just note this is another one of those items that the Planning Commission has reviewed for a number of weeks now and evaluated what makes the most sense to make our code consistent in multiple areas. So this is another one that has had quite a bit of vetting. So that's why we maybe aren't having as many questions. Were there any additional public comments that were received on GJ Speaks or via the phone for this item?
Madam Chair, we have not received any additional public comment.
Thank you for that. Are there any, I'm sorry, at this time, we'll close the public comment portion of the hearing. Are there any questions for staff from the Planning Commission?
No. No.
Seeing none. At this time, we'll close the public hearing and turn to the Planning Commission for any discussion, deliberation, and a motion.
Madam Chairman,
Commissioner Wade.
on the B1 setback reduction, city file number ZCA 2020-172, I move that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to City Council with the findings of fact as listed in the staff report.
Thank you, Commissioner Wade. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, if you are in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. If you are opposed, nay. Commissioner Ehlers,
Aye.
Commissioner Gatzos,
Aye.
Commissioner Scissors,
Aye.
Commissioner Cesaros,
Aye.
Commissioner Teske,
Aye.
Commissioner Wade,
Aye.
and I am also an aye, so that motion carries 7-0. Do we have any other business before us this evening?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Gatzos.
I want to personally, and for the commissioners, I think I can speak. I want to thank you for a great job tonight. And I think you are pretty good with Zoom.
Well, Bella's the one running the show here, but thank you very much for your compliment.
And everybody else. And by the way, I was really impressed by all the staff efforts and the new platform is, I think, awesome. And I'm very positive on this. Maybe we'd like to do this for a long time.
I agree, George. I like the GJ Speaks platform. I feel that having the information more in advance and being able to kind of chew over it for a couple of days longer than maybe we normally would, or to be able to have them all up on another screen while we're hearing the presentation has been really helpful tonight. So I agree. And the speed with which the staff has been able to put this platform together really is astounding.
And I think it for the public that's it's still live. I think it's important to note that, you know, the staff and the commissioners really made an effort to read the comments. And the public hearing portion of these meetings are still the critical portion.
Right. Agreed. Thank
Yeah,
you,
one of them-
Commissioner.
Madam Chairman, one of the things I like about Grand Junction Speaks is they can now tell whether we've read it or not. I think that's an ancillary gain that the staff has because they can look at it and see if we've looked at it.
And they can say,
Before, you never
"No."
knew whether they said it to us, we didn't read it.
That's right. That's right. Any other comments or discussion?
Madam Chair, if I may have, it's not orders of business, but just a couple of quick reminders. So we do have a second April meeting scheduled for this month. So we will have our April 23rd workshop followed by, I believe, an April 28th meeting. So I do owe you guys an email with your forthcoming dates. So do look for that in the next day or so. And then I also wanted to let you know that you will be receiving an email or outreach from one of our IT technicians here with the city who is working on implementing some additional cybersecurity that will be utilized for your iPads and other devices that have been issued for your work as a planning commissioner here with the city. So look for that. And that is all I have for you this evening.
Thank you, Miss Allen, and everybody on the team. Have a good evening, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night.
Thank you.